Welcome back to my channel. Stop before you spend that Lincoln Memorial penny. Money. America's famous 1-cent coins are attracting serious attention from collectors, and some unusual examples can sell for impressive prices. Today, we're diving into the world of Lincoln Memorial cents and examining the features that can separate an ordinary penny from a truly collectible coin. From rare varieties and minting errors to exceptional condition and important dates, we'll explore what collectors look for in the current 2026 market. So grab your coins, check your change, and let's see what treasures might be hiding in plain sight. Let's get started. First up, the 1961 Lincoln Memorial 1 cent, an old United States penny that is now more than 6 decades old. At first glance, this coin may look like an ordinary copper cent, but collectors know that age alone does not determine a coin's value. The 1961 was struck at the Denver Mint and carries the small D mint mark below the date, identifying its place of production. More than 1.75 billion 1961 cents were produced, meaning the date itself is not considered a major rarity. However, individual examples can become much more interesting when they survive in unusually high grades, retain attractive original red color, or show a recognized mint variety or error. Current published guides show that ordinary examples can be worth only cents to a few dollars depending on condition, while exceptional certified pieces can reach much higher prices. The history of this coin begins with the introduction of the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959, replacing the famous wheat reverse that had appeared on Lincoln cents since 1909. The new design was created to honor the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. On the obverse, Lincoln's portrait remains the central feature, accompanied by the inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial appears prominently in the center, with United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and 1 cent surrounding it. The 1961 therefore belongs to the early years of the Lincoln Memorial series, making it historically interesting to collectors who specialize in the first decade of this long-running design. The coin was made from a traditional copper alloy used for U.S. cents of the period, with a weight of about 3.11 grams and a diameter of approximately 19 millimeters. One of the most important things to understand about the 1961 Lincoln penny is the difference between an old coin and a genuinely rare coin. Because more than 1.7 billion pieces were struck, simply finding a 1961 penny does not automatically mean you have a valuable treasure. Millions of these coins entered circulation, where they were exposed to scratches, dirt, discoloration, dents, and heavy wear. After more than 60 years, many surviving examples have lost much of their original detail and copper color. A circulated 1961 can therefore remain close to its face value or carry only a modest collector premium. But condition changes the picture dramatically. A coin that escaped circulation and still has sharp details, strong luster, and attractive original color can be far more desirable. This is why collectors examine the condition before deciding whether a 1961 cent deserves professional grading. Another major factor is the coin's color and surface quality. Copper Lincoln cents are commonly described by collectors as brown, red-brown, or red. A coin that retains a large amount of its original reddish color can command a much stronger premium than a heavily darkened or damaged example, especially when it also has a high mint state grade. For the 1961 published values illustrate this difference clearly. One current guide lists approximately $1 for an M-63 red example, $3 for M-63, $6 for M-64, $14 for M-65, $23 for M-66, and as much as $642 for an M-67 red example. Although actual market prices can change and individual coins can sell for more or less depending on certification, eye appeal, and demand. These numbers should not be interpreted as a guarantee that every old 1961 penny is worth hundreds of dollars. Instead, they demonstrate how dramatically value can increase when a common date survives in an extraordinary condition. Collectors should also carefully inspect the mint mark and date when searching for a 1961 The D beneath the date indicates Denver production, and varieties involving the mint mark have attracted attention from Lincoln cent specialists. Some references discuss repunched mint mark varieties associated with the 1961 including examples where traces of an earlier mint mark impression may be visible. However, not every unusual-looking D is valuable, and damage, corrosion, machine doubling, or other forms of post-mint alteration can easily be mistaken for a genuine variety. Some collector references also discuss a 1961D/D variety, but authentication is important before assigning a substantial value. If your coin appears to show a clearly doubled mint mark, date, or lettering, it is better to compare it with established variety references or have it examined by a qualified numismatist rather than assuming it is a rare error. The condition of the coin is another critical part of determining its current market value. A heavily worn 1961D with scratches and discoloration may have very little premium, while a clean-looking, sharply struck coin with original surfaces can be much more interesting. Collectors should look closely at Lincoln's hair and facial details, the lettering, the date, the mint mark, and the columns and architectural details on the Lincoln memorial. They should also inspect the surfaces under good lighting for scratches, spots, corrosion, cleaning, or unnatural color. One interesting characteristic of early 1960s Denver Lincoln cents is that high-quality examples can be difficult to find because many were subjected to rough handling. This makes exceptionally preserved pieces more desirable than the enormous mintage figure alone might suggest. So what could a 1961D Lincoln Memorial penny be worth today? The honest answer is that the range is extremely wide because condition is everything. A normal circulated example may be worth around face value or a small premium. Current published estimates show uncirculated examples around the lower dollar range, while high-grade red examples can move into tens or hundreds of dollars. One current guide lists an M. Sminus 67 red example around $642, demonstrating the kind of premium an extraordinary coin can receive. At the same time, you should be very cautious with claims that an ordinary 1961D penny is automatically worth thousands of dollars. A coin would generally need an exceptional grade, a recognized and desirable variety, or another significant feature to justify a major premium. Auction and dealer prices can also fluctuate, so a price guide number should be treated as an estimate rather than a guaranteed selling price. Finally, if you find a 1961D Lincoln Memorial cent in an old collection, coin jar, inherited group, or pocket change, do not immediately dismiss it just because the date is common. First, check the D mint mark, examine the date carefully, inspect the coin for unusual doubling or a possible repunched mint mark, and then evaluate its overall condition. Look for strong original copper color, clean surfaces, sharp details, and especially high-grade characteristics. Remember that the 1961D is a high mintage coin, so rarity does not come from the date alone. Its real collecting potential comes from exceptional preservation and unusual varieties. In other words, the 1961D Lincoln Memorial cent may not be a guaranteed fortune, but a truly outstanding example can be significantly more valuable than its 1 cent face value. So before spending or discarding that old penny, take a closer look. You might discover that its condition and unique characteristics make it worth adding to a serious Lincoln cent collection. Next up, the 1963D Lincoln Memorial 1 cent is an interesting piece of American coinage history, and a coin that many collectors still enjoy searching for today. Struck at the Denver Mint, this penny carries the small D mint mark beneath the date, identifying its place of production. The Lincoln Memorial cent series had begun only a few years earlier in 1959, replacing the famous Lincoln wheat reverse. The change was made to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and the new reverse featured the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The obverse continued to display Victor David Brenner's famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln, while the reverse design was created by Frank Gasparo. By 1963, the memorial cent had become a familiar part of everyday American commerce. The 1963D issue is especially interesting because more than 1.77 billion pieces were struck at Denver, making it a common date overall rather than a scarce coin. However, common does not always mean uninteresting, because collectors continue to look for unusual varieties, mint errors, attractive original surfaces, and exceptionally preserved examples. When examining a 1963D Lincoln Memorial cent, the first thing to confirm is the date and mint mark. The date 1963 should appear clearly on the obverse, with the small d directly below it. Lincoln faces right with the inscriptions in God We Trust, Liberty, and the date surrounding his portrait. On the reverse is the Lincoln Memorial, with United States of America around the upper portion, EPLURBUSUNUM above the building and 1 cent below. The coin measures approximately 19 millimeters in diameter and weighs 3.11 grams, with a plain edge. It was made from the traditional bronze composition used for Lincoln cents at the time, consisting of approximately 95% copper and 5% zinc. Because your example is described as being in rough condition, you should expect to see considerable wear, discoloration, scratches, or loss of original reddish color. Those characteristics normally reduce collector value, but they do not prevent the coin from being collectible. In fact, an old circulated penny can still be worth examining carefully because damage and wear sometimes hide small but important minting characteristics. Condition is one of the most important factors when determining what a 1963D Lincoln Memorial cent is worth. A heavily circulated or rough example generally does not command a large premium simply because it is more than 60 years old. Collectors distinguish copper cents by their surface color as well as their grade, commonly using categories such as brown, and red. A coin that retains a large amount of its original red color and has very little contact damage can be considerably more desirable than a brown, heavily worn example. This is why two 1963D pennies that look almost identical to an inexperienced collector can have dramatically different prices. A rough circulated coin may be worth only a small amount above face value, while an unusually attractive, professionally graded example can bring much more. PCGS records a particularly strong auction result of $7,499 for a 1963D Lincoln cent graded MS67 RD. Showing how exceptional preservation can transform the market value of an otherwise common date. The D mint mark is one of the most important identification details on this coin. It tells collectors that the penny was produced at the Denver Mint. However, simply having a D does not automatically make a 1963 penny rare. Collectors should carefully inspect the mint mark and the rest of the coin for possible varieties. The 1963D Lincoln cent is known in collecting references with several classifications, including regular brown, and red examples, as well as recognized double-die varieties. PCGS specifically lists 1963D double-die varieties, including Fs-101, among the known varieties for this issue. If you believe your coin has doubling, do not assume that every blurry or shadow-like appearance is a valuable error. Genuine double-die characteristics should be examined carefully under magnification, particularly around the date and lettering. Machine doubling, scratches, dents, corrosion, and normal wear can sometimes create appearances that look unusual but have little or no added value. For that reason, serious collectors compare their coins with recognized variety references before deciding that they have discovered something rare. Now let us discuss the question that every collector wants answered. How much could a 1963D Lincoln Memorial cent be worth today? For a typical rough, circulated example, the realistic value is generally modest, and it should not automatically be described as a coin worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The large Denver mintage means ordinary 1963D cents are readily available. However, values can rise substantially when the coin has an unusual mint error, a recognized double-die variety, or exceptional uncirculated preservation. PCGS auction information provides an excellent example of this difference. A normal-looking date can become highly valuable at an elite grade, with a recorded MS67 RD auction result of $7,499. Other varieties have their own separate market records. For example, PCGS lists a 1963D DDO example with an auction record of $358 in MS64, while another brown DDO record is listed at $40 in a U55. These figures should be viewed as documented examples rather than guaranteed prices for every coin. A rough circulated 1963D penny is not comparable to a professionally graded top-condition specimen. Even if your 1963D penny looks rough, there are still several details worth checking before putting it back into a jar or spending it. Start with the date and mint mark, then inspect the lettering, Lincoln's portrait, and the reverse design under good lighting. Look for unusual doubling, misplaced details, die cracks, strong die breaks, off-center striking, or other genuine mint-made characteristics. Pay particular attention to the date, Liberty in God We Trust, and the D mint mark, because varieties can sometimes be identified through specific details in these areas. Remember that post-mint damage is extremely common on circulated copper cents. Scratches, dents, environmental discoloration, cleaning, corrosion, and flattening caused by circulation are not normally valuable mint errors. A true mint error occurred during the manufacturing process, while damage happened after the coin left the mint. This distinction can make a major difference in value. If you discover a feature that appears unusual, comparing it with trusted numismatic references or having it examined by a professional can help prevent an exciting discovery from being mistaken for ordinary damage. The 1963 Lincoln Memorial Cent is therefore a perfect example of why coin collecting requires patience and careful observation. Its enormous mintage means the ordinary coin is not considered rare simply because it is over 60 years old. At the same time, the issue demonstrates how grading, color, varieties, and errors can create very different values within the same date and mint mark. A rough brown coin should not be valued in the same way as a brilliant red coin preserved at a very high mint state grade. PCGS lists the standard 1963 cent through multiple color and grade categories and also separately identifies double die varieties. This is important for viewers because internet videos and online listings sometimes show an extraordinary sale and make it appear that every coin from the same year is worth thousands of dollars. That is not how the rare coin market works. The highest prices usually belong to coins with an unusual combination of rarity, condition, eye appeal, and collector demand. Therefore, if you own a rough 1963 cent, examine it carefully, but keep realistic expectations about its value. In conclusion, the 1963 Lincoln Memorial 1 cent is a fascinating survivor from an important period of American coinage. It was struck at the Denver Mint in enormous numbers, with a recorded mintage of 1,774,020,400, and its bronze composition, classic Lincoln portrait, memorial reverse, and D-mint mark make it easy to identify. Most rough circulated examples will not be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars merely because of their age. However, the coin becomes much more interesting if it contains a recognized double die variety, another genuine mint error, or exceptional preservation. The documented $7,499 MS-67 RD auction result demonstrates just how dramatically value can increase when an otherwise common date reaches an extraordinary grade. So before you spend or discard an old 1963 penny, take a moment to inspect it closely. Check the date, confirm the D-mint mark, examine the color and surfaces, and look carefully for genuine varieties or errors. You may not have a fortune in your hand, but you could have an interesting piece of American history, and that is exactly what makes searching old Lincoln cents so exciting. Next up, the 1969 Lincoln Memorial Cent is an interesting piece of American coinage history, and if you have one sitting in an old collection, jar, box, drawer, or even loose change, it is definitely worth taking a closer look at before deciding what it is worth. This coin was struck at the Denver Mint and carries the small D mint mark below the date, identifying its place of production. The 1969 cent belongs to the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, which began in 1959 when the reverse design was changed from the famous wheat ears to the Lincoln Memorial. By 1969, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for more than half a century, and billions of cents were being produced to satisfy America's enormous demand for small denomination coins. According to PCGS, approximately 4,002,832,200 Lincoln cents were struck at Denver in 1969, meaning the ordinary 1969 cent is not automatically rare simply because it is more than 5 decades old. However, collectors understand that mintage alone does not determine a coin's value. Condition, color, strike quality, die varieties, errors, and certified grade can dramatically change the market value of an individual example. The history behind the 1969 Lincoln cent also makes it fascinating. The coin carries the classic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, based on the work of designer Victor David Brenner, while the reverse displays the Lincoln Memorial, a design created by Frank Gasparo. The memorial reverse remained on the Lincoln cent from 1959 until 2008, making the 1969 part of one of the longest-running reverse designs in modern United States coinage. The cent was made primarily of a copper alloy, giving many surviving examples their familiar brown, reddish-brown, or red appearance, depending on how they were stored and how much they circulated. A dusty or rough-looking 1969 cent can show dark brown surfaces, dirt around the lettering, scratches, small marks, discoloration, and loss of the original red color. Those characteristics usually indicate substantial circulation or poor storage rather than rarity. Still, the coin should be examined carefully because surface appearance alone does not tell the entire story. A dirty-looking coin can sometimes hide an unusual die characteristic or mint error that deserves professional attention. At the same time, collectors should never assume that every dark, damaged, or unusual-looking coin is valuable. Genuine rarity must be supported by identifiable characteristics, and for major varieties, professional authentication. One of the first things you should check on a 1969 Lincoln cent is the mint mark. Turn the coin to the obverse and look directly beneath the date. A small d indicates that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. This is important because different 1969 Lincoln cents have different production histories and values. The famous and extremely valuable double die variety associated with the year 1969 is the 1969s double die obverse, not the normal 1969 cent. That distinction is extremely important for anyone making a coin value video or checking a collection. The 1969 should not be advertised as a $10,000 or $100,000 coin merely because it says 1969 and has a D mint mark. In fact, PCGS lists ordinary 1969 cents by brown, and red designations, with values rising substantially as certified condition improves. The same PCGS data also documents a special 1969 no FG variety, showing that unusual varieties can exist within the Denver issue. Now let's talk about the dusty or rough condition specified for this coin. If your 1969 cent has heavy dirt, scratches, dark oxidation, contact marks, worn lettering, or a generally circulated appearance, you should be realistic about its value. A normal circulated example is generally not a coin worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, simply because it is from 1969. The big money examples are usually associated with exceptional preservation, recognized varieties, or significant mint errors. In other words, a dusty 1969 should be investigated, but you should not clean it in an attempt to make it look more valuable. Cleaning can leave permanent hairlines and unnatural surfaces and may actually reduce collector interest. Instead, examine the coin exactly as you found it. Look closely at the date, the D mint mark, Lincoln's portrait, the lettering Liberty, and the reverse lettering around the memorial. Also inspect the edges and surfaces for unusual striking problems. If something appears genuinely unusual, take clear photographs and consider having the coin examined by a reputable numismatist or professional grading service rather than relying on an internet claim. Another important area is the possibility of die varieties and minting errors. The 1969 issue has documented varieties, including a PCGS-listed no FG, F-901 variety. FG refers to the initials of Frank Gasparo, whose initials normally appear near the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. A missing or weak-looking feature can sometimes be caused by wear, damage, polishing, or strike characteristics, so collectors must be careful when identifying a variety. The PCGS record for the 1969 no FG variety shows an auction record of $505 for an MS65RD example sold by Heritage Auctions in 2017. This demonstrates an important point. A specialized variety can bring substantially more than a normal circulated coin, but that does not mean every 1969 with a weak or missing detail is worth hundreds of dollars. Authentication, attribution, and condition matter. When discussing the current market value, the most important thing is to separate an ordinary 1969 from exceptional examples. PCGS Lincoln Cent Price Guide lists separate values for 1969 brown, and red examples, with prices increasing as the certified grade rises. Its current guide shows ordinary 1969 red examples moving from relatively modest values in lower mint state grades into much higher amounts at the finest grades, demonstrating how strongly condition can influence the market. For example, PCGS lists values around $812, $974 for MS64RD, approximately $1,299, $1,624 for MS65RD, and considerably higher guide figures for very high-grade examples. These are guide values and should not be interpreted as a guaranteed selling price. Actual auction results can be different depending on certification, eye appeal, population, demand, and the specific variety. For a dusty, heavily circulated 1969, however, those high mint state figures generally do not apply. The key lesson for viewers is that the coin's condition must match the grade being discussed. There is another reason the year 1969 attracts so much attention from collectors, the legendary 1969's double die obverse. This is not the same coin as the normal 1969, but it is essential to mention because people frequently confuse the two. The 1969's double die is famous for dramatic doubling on the obverse, particularly around the date and lettering, and genuine examples can be extremely valuable. PCGS Price Guide lists the 1969's double die obverse separately and shows dramatically higher values than ordinary 1969 cents. This is why every 1969 Lincoln cent deserves a careful inspection, but it is also why viewers must read the mint mark correctly. If your coin clearly has a D, you should not automatically assign it the value of a 1969's doubled die. Instead, focus on the characteristics actually present on your coin. A dusty 1969 could still be interesting, but the evidence must come from the coin itself. Finally, if you discover a 1969 Lincoln Memorial cent in rough or dusty condition, don't throw it away and don't clean it. First, identify the date and confirm the D mint mark. Then examine both sides under good lighting and a magnifying glass. Look for unusual doubling, missing design elements, dramatic die breaks, off-center striking, unusual rotation, or other characteristics that appear to have originated during the minting process rather than from later damage. Remember that the ordinary 1969 had a huge production of more than 4 billion pieces, so rarity cannot be assumed from the year alone. A normal worn example may have only modest collector value, while a properly authenticated variety or exceptional high-grade specimen can be worth much more. The best approach is to compare your coin with reliable price guides, and if something truly unusual appears, seek professional attribution or grading. So before you spend that old 1969 Lincoln Memorial cent, take a second look. It may not be a fortune simply because it is 57 years old, but the right combination of condition, variety, and genuine mint error can turn an ordinary-looking 1-cent coin into a fascinating collectible. And that is exactly what makes searching old American coins so exciting. Next up, the 1971 Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin is a fascinating piece of American history that many people may still have sitting unnoticed in an old coin jar, collection, drawer, or box of change. At first glance, it may appear to be nothing more than an ordinary 1-cent coin, but this small copper coin represents an important period in the history of United States coinage. The 1971 cent was part of the famous Lincoln Memorial cent series that began in 1959, replacing the earlier Lincoln wheat reverse. The obverse features the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, originally designed by Victor David Brenner, while the reverse displays the Lincoln Memorial design created by Frank Gasparo. In 1971, the Philadelphia Mint produced a huge quantity of these cents without placing a mint mark on the coin. In fact, approximately 1.919 billion 1971 cents were struck at Philadelphia, meaning that the absence of a mint mark is completely normal for this issue, rather than automatically indicating a rare error. One of the first things collectors should understand about a 1971 Lincoln Memorial cent is the meaning of the missing mint mark. Look directly beneath the date, 1971, on the obverse. If there is no letter there, the coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. This is an important identification feature because coins from Denver normally carry a D, while San Francisco issues can carry an S. A 1971 cent without a mint mark is therefore a Philadelphia issue, not automatically an error or an extremely rare coin. This distinction is especially important because many people see the empty space below the date and assume that something went wrong during production. In reality, Philadelphia cents of this era normally had no mint mark. The real question is not simply whether the coin has a mint mark, but whether the particular example has an unusual variety, an important minting error, or an exceptionally high grade that separates it from the enormous number of ordinary 1971 cents that survive today. The 1971 Lincoln Memorial cent has several characteristics that make it easy to identify. It measures approximately 19 millimeters across, weighs about 3.11 grams, and was struck from a copper-based alloy containing approximately 95% copper and 5% zinc. Its plain edge and familiar Lincoln design make it instantly recognizable to collectors. Because it was produced before the major composition change of 1982, the 1971 cent belongs to the earlier copper alloy era of Lincoln cents. The obverse shows Lincoln facing right, with the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust, along with the date 1971. On the reverse is the Lincoln Memorial surrounded by United States of America, 1 cent, and EPLUOBUSUNUM. These design details are more than decoration. They help collectors determine whether the coin has been heavily worn, unusually well preserved, or affected by a possible die variety. Now comes the most important question. Can a 1971 no-mint mark Lincoln cent really be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? The answer is that an ordinary circulated example generally is not. With more than 1.9 billion Philadelphia cents produced, common 1971 cents are plentiful. Current price references show that ordinary circulated pieces generally have little or no significant numismatic premium, while uncirculated examples can bring more depending on their grade and color. The real opportunity comes when a coin is dramatically better preserved than the average survivor, has a recognized double die or other variety, or possesses an unusual minting error. Professional grading becomes extremely important at the highest levels because tiny differences in surface preservation, original color, strike quality, and marks can separate an ordinary coin from a scarce condition rarity. Collectors should therefore avoid assuming that every 1971 penny is valuable simply because it is more than 50 years old. Condition is one of the biggest factors affecting the value of a 1971 Lincoln Memorial cent. A heavily circulated coin with scratches, discoloration, stains, dents, and worn details may remain close to ordinary collector value, but a coin that has survived in brilliant uncirculated condition can be much more interesting. Lincoln cents are commonly described by color designations such as brown, and red. A red example retains much more of its original mint color and can be considerably more desirable when combined with a high numerical grade. According to PCGS Coin Facts, a 1971 Philadelphia cent graded MS67 plus red has an auction record of $4,406, achieved at Heritage Auctions in 2014. That does not mean a normal 1971 penny is worth $4,406. Rather, it demonstrates how exceptional condition can dramatically change the value of an otherwise common date. This is why collectors should inspect the coin carefully instead of judging value solely from its age. Another area that can make a 1971 Lincoln Memorial cent significantly more valuable is a recognized variety or genuine mint error. PCGS records several 1971 varieties, including double die obverse examples and FS-listed die varieties. A double die coin can show noticeable doubling in particular lettering, numbers, or design elements, but collectors need to be extremely careful because ordinary machine doubling, damage, scratches, and post-mint alterations can easily be mistaken for a true double die. Genuine varieties are identified through established diagnostics rather than simply because something looks slightly unusual under casual inspection. A valuable error can also result from an abnormal planchet, striking problem, or other manufacturing mistake. If your 1971 no mint mark cent appears dramatically different from normal examples, it may be worth having the variety authenticated before assuming a huge value. For the 2026 market, the value range of a 1971 Philadelphia Lincoln Memorial cent depends heavily on condition and rarity. A normal worn example is generally not a hundreds of dollars coin, and claims that every 1971 no mint mark cent is worth thousands should be treated with skepticism. Reference data currently lists an estimated value of about $1.24 or more for an uncirculated example in the relevant pricing table, while extraordinary professionally graded specimens can sell for substantially more. The documented $4,406 auction result for a PCGS MS67 plus red example shows the upper end can become impressive when condition is exceptional. Therefore, the most realistic way to describe this coin is that common examples may be worth little beyond ordinary collector interest. Better uncirculated pieces may bring a modest premium, and exceptional top-grade examples or authenticated varieties can potentially reach hundreds or thousands of dollars. Actual selling prices can vary based on grade, color, eye appeal, certification, variety, and market demand. So, before you spend or discard a 1971 Lincoln Memorial cent with no mint mark, take a closer look, but do not assume that the missing mint mark alone makes it rare. First, confirm that the date is truly 1971, then check beneath the date to confirm the absence of a mint mark. Examine Lincoln's portrait for unusual doubling, inspect the lettering and date under good lighting, and study the reverse for abnormalities. Next, look at the overall condition and original color. Avoid cleaning the coin because cleaning can permanently damage the surfaces and reduce collector appeal. If the coin appears unusually sharp, bright, and free from marks, or if you believe you have discovered a genuine double die or mint error, professional authentication and grading may be worthwhile. The 1971 Philadelphia Lincoln Memorial cent is a perfect reminder that coin collecting is not simply about age. The combination of rarity, condition, variety, originality, and collector demand is what creates significant value. A coin that looks ordinary today could still be an interesting piece of American history, and the most exciting part of collecting is learning exactly what you have before deciding what it may be worth next up. The 1975 Lincoln Memorial cent was produced at the Philadelphia Mint without a mint mark, so seeing no letter below the date is completely normal for this issue. The coin belongs to the famous Lincoln Memorial cent series that began in 1959, replacing the earlier wheat reverse with the image of the Lincoln Memorial. The 1975 issue is especially interesting today because it is now more than half a century old, connecting modern collectors with an important period in American coinage history. However, it is important to understand that not every 1975 penny is automatically rare or worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The Philadelphia issue had a very large production of more than 5.45 billion coins, meaning ordinary circulated examples remain plentiful. The real collecting interest comes from condition, original color, exceptional preservation, unusual varieties, and authentic mint errors. The history behind this coin begins with Abraham Lincoln's appearance on the U.S. cent in 1909, but the specific memorial design arrived in 1959. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln remained on the obverse, while Frank Gasparo's Lincoln Memorial design appeared on the reverse. This design continued for decades and became one of the most familiar coins in American everyday life. By 1975, millions of Americans were using Lincoln cents for purchases, vending machines, parking meters, and everyday transactions. The coin's obverse shows Lincoln facing right, with the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust surrounding his portrait, and the date 1975 positioned prominently in front of him. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial dominates the center, surrounded by United States of America, EPLURBUSUNUM and 1 cent. Because the 1975 Philadelphia cent carries no mint mark, collectors should not mistake the absence of a letter for an error. A genuine Philadelphia 1975 cent is supposed to have no mint mark. That simple detail is one of the first things a collector should check when identifying the coin. One of the most important characteristics of the 1975 Lincoln Memorial cent is its composition. PCGS records the regular 1975 cent as measuring approximately 19 millimeters in diameter, weighing about 3.11 grams, and being made from a copper-based alloy containing 95% copper and 5% zinc. Its edge is plain rather than reeded. These specifications can help collectors separate a normal 1975 cent from unusual pieces that may deserve additional investigation. The coin's copper content also contributes to the warm reddish appearance seen on well-preserved examples. Over time, however, exposure to air, moisture, chemicals, handling, and other environmental conditions can change the surface color from bright red to reddish brown or brown. This is why two coins from the same year can look dramatically different and have completely different collector appeal. When examining a 1975 no-mint mark cent, look closely at the date, Lincoln's hair and facial details, the lettering, the memorial columns, and the overall surface. Avoid cleaning the coin because polishing or harsh chemical treatment can damage its original surface and potentially reduce collector interest. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where the difference between an ordinary 1975 penny and a collectible example can become significant. A coin described as being in fine condition has already experienced noticeable circulation, with wear visible on Lincoln's portrait and the reverse design. A typical circulated 1975 no-mint mark cent in fine condition generally should not be described as a rare $1,000 coin simply because of its date. Its huge mintage means that ordinary circulated pieces are common. The situation changes when a coin survives in exceptionally high grade with strong original detail, attractive color, and very few marks. Collectors and grading companies use numerical grades to distinguish levels of preservation, and the highest quality examples can command premiums. PCGS auction records demonstrate this clearly. A 1975 Lincoln cent graded MS68 RD reached an auction record of $9,000 in 2018. That result represents an extraordinary high-grade example, not the normal value of a circulated coin. For collectors searching through a 1975 Lincoln cent, the next step is to inspect the coin for unusual features. Look for doubled lettering or numbers, unusual die characteristics, off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, major die breaks, or other legitimate minting abnormalities. However, be careful because many marks found on old pennies happened after the coin left the mint. Scratches, dents, corrosion, discoloration, machine damage, and damage caused by coins rubbing together do not automatically make a coin a valuable mint error. A genuine error normally has characteristics that can be connected to the manufacturing process. Another important point is that some people may encounter unusual-looking 1975 cents and assume they are made from aluminum because of stories about experimental U.S. cents during the 1970s. The existence of experimental pieces from that era does not mean an ordinary lightweight or unusual-looking 1975 cent is automatically valuable. Any suspected off-metal or experimental piece should be professionally authenticated before assigning it a major value. So what could a 1975 Lincoln Memorial cent with no mint mark actually be worth today? The answer depends heavily on grade, color, originality, errors, and authentication. A normal circulated coin in fine condition is generally a low-value collectible and may be worth only a small premium over its 1 cent face value, if any. Better preserved uncirculated pieces can bring several dollars or more depending on grade and color, while professionally graded high-end examples can reach substantially higher prices. PCGS records, for example, show a 1975 brown cent with an MS-65 grade selling for $900, while a certified MS-66 red example has recorded sales in the tens of dollars. These results show why it is misleading to give every 1975 penny a value of hundreds or thousands. The big money belongs to exceptional specimens, not ordinary examples. The most important lesson for anyone finding this coin is to learn how to separate rarity from age. A coin being over 50 years old does not automatically make it rare, and the absence of a mint mark on a 1975 Philadelphia cent is not itself an error. Instead, collectors should examine the complete package: date, mint mark status, condition, color, strike quality, surface preservation, possible varieties, and any genuine mint-made errors. If your coin is only in fine condition with normal circulation, where it should be viewed realistically rather than assuming it is worth thousands. On the other hand, if you discover a remarkably preserved specimen with brilliant original red color, unusual doubling, a dramatic strike error, or another feature that appears genuinely unusual, that is when professional evaluation becomes worthwhile. A reputable grading service can authenticate the coin and assign a standardized grade, giving collectors and buyers a much more reliable basis for determining market value. Finally, the 1975 Lincoln Memorial cent remains an interesting piece of American history even when it is not rare. Its enormous production reflects the role of the penny in everyday American commerce during the 1970s, while surviving high-grade examples demonstrate how preservation can transform an ordinary coin into a sought-after collectible. The highest recorded prices should be viewed as exceptional auction results rather than guaranteed values for every coin. If you have a 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln cent, examine it carefully under good lighting, check the surfaces without cleaning it, compare the details with authenticated examples, and consider professional grading only when the coin appears to have truly exceptional quality or an unusual mint error. So before you spend or dismiss that old 1975 penny, take a closer look. It may not be $1,000 treasure simply because it has no mint mark, but the right combination of condition, rarity, and authentic mint-made characteristics can make a seemingly ordinary Lincoln Memorial cent much more interesting to collectors. Next up, the 1970-90 Lincoln Memorial cent is a fascinating piece of American coinage that can still attract collectors more than 4 decades after it was produced. At first glance, this coin may look like an ordinary 1-cent piece, but collectors know that small details such as condition, color, strike quality, errors, and varieties can make a major difference in value. The D mint mark beneath the date tells us that this particular example was struck at the Denver Mint, rather than Philadelphia. The 1970-90 Lincoln cent had an enormous reported mintage of approximately 4.14 billion pieces, so the normal circulated example is not rare simply because of its age. However, truly exceptional examples with strong original red color, very few marks, excellent luster, and unusually high certified grades can become much more desirable. PCGS records an auction result of $3,995 for a 1970-90 Lincoln cent graded MS-67 plus RD, demonstrating that extraordinary condition can create a dramatic premium, even for a coin from a large mintage. The story of this coin goes back to 1909, when the Lincoln cent was introduced with the famous portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. In 1959, the reverse design changed from the classic wheat ears to the Lincoln Memorial, created by designer Frank Gasparo, to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The memorial reverse remained on the cent for nearly half a century, from 1959 through 2008. By 1979, the Lincoln Memorial cent had already become an extremely familiar part of American daily commerce, appearing in cash registers, vending machines, coin jars, and pocket change across the country. The obverse features Lincoln facing right, with the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust, along with the date and mint mark. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial is surrounded by the denomination 1 cent and the inscription United States of America. This combination of historical imagery and everyday use is one reason collectors continue to build complete Lincoln Memorial cent collections. One particularly important feature of the 1970-90 cent is its composition. According to PCGS, the coin has a weight of approximately 3.11 grams, a diameter of 19 millimeters, a plain edge, and a composition of approximately 95% copper and 5% zinc. This copper composition gives many surviving examples their familiar reddish-brown or reddish-orange appearance, especially when the original mint color has been preserved. Collectors often describe these coins using the designations BN, RB, and RD, referring to brown, red-brown, and red coloration. A nice condition coin with bright original red color can be considerably more desirable than a similar coin that has darkened, scratched, or developed environmental damage. This is why simply saying that a 1970-90 penny is uncirculated is not enough to determine its value. Collectors examine the surfaces carefully for contact marks, scratches, spots, discoloration, weak areas, and other imperfections before deciding how desirable the coin really is. For someone examining a 1970-90 Lincoln cent in nice condition, the first thing to check is the overall preservation. Look closely at Lincoln's cheek and jaw, the fields around his portrait, the lettering, and the high points of the memorial on the reverse. A coin that spent years circulating may show numerous small marks and loss of original luster, while a coin that was protected shortly after leaving the mint may retain a much sharper appearance. The next feature to examine is the D-mint mark, which confirms the Denver origin of the coin. After that, inspect the date and lettering for unusual doubling, repunch details, die cracks, cuds, or other possible mint-made abnormalities. However, not every unusual-looking mark is a valuable error. Damage caused after the coin left the mint can easily be mistaken for a mint error, so serious collectors compare suspected varieties with authenticated examples, and when appropriate, submit important coins to professional grading services. The question everyone wants answered is, how much can a 1970-90 Lincoln Memorial cent actually be worth today? The answer depends heavily on condition and rarity. A normal circulated 1970-90 cent generally does not bring hundreds or thousands of dollars simply because it is from 1979. Even certified examples in ordinary mint state grades can have relatively modest values. For example, PCGS auction records show a 1970-90 MS65 example selling for $7, while another MS66 example sold for $55. A certified MS67 example brought $763.75 at auction, illustrating how quickly the premium can increase at the highest grades. These figures are historical auction results, not guaranteed prices for every coin today. The spectacular $3,995 MS67 plus RD result represents an exceptionally high-grade example rather than the typical value of a nice circulated penny. This is where the idea of a rare 1970-90 penny needs to be understood correctly. The coin itself is not rare in the ordinary sense because billions were produced, but high-grade survivors can be much scarcer. PCGS lists the 1970-90 series with different levels of certified survival depending on grade, and the population becomes increasingly selective as the grade rises. NGC also lists the 1970-90 as part of the Lincoln Memorial cent series and provides separate grade information for brown, and red examples. This means that a collector searching through old coin jars or inherited collections should not automatically assume that every 1970-90 cent is valuable, but they should pay attention to unusually clean, bright, sharply struck pieces. A genuine mint error or an exceptional certified grade can be much more important than the date alone. Another important point is that condition is everything when discussing high values. A dusty, scratched, heavily circulated, or damaged 1970-90 penny should not be valued in the hundreds or thousands merely because someone online claims that the year is rare. Professional collectors compare actual auction records, grading standards, certified populations, and identifiable varieties. A 1970-90 cent in ordinary condition may remain close to its face value, while a superior mint state example can bring tens or hundreds of dollars, and an extremely high-grade certified piece can reach into the thousands. PCGS recorded $3,995 MS67 plus RD auction result is an excellent example of how an ordinary-looking denomination can become a serious collectible when combined with exceptional preservation and scarcity at the top grade levels. Therefore, if you discover a beautiful 1970-90 penny, do not clean or polish it. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surfaces and may reduce collector interest. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges and consider professional evaluation if the coin appears exceptionally sharp and original. Finally, the 1970-90 Lincoln Memorial Cent is a perfect example of why coin collecting is about much more than simply finding an old coin. Its history connects Abraham Lincoln, the Denver Mint, the long-running memorial reverse, and the everyday economic life of the United States during the late 20th century. Most 1970-90 cents are common, but the exceptional examples remind us that condition, color, strike, varieties, and genuine mint errors can completely change a coin's desirability. If you have one in nice condition, inspect the surfaces under good lighting, confirm the D-mint mark, check the color and luster, and look carefully for unusual mint-made characteristics. And remember, the highest prices reported for this date belong to exceptional examples, not ordinary circulated pieces. With a recorded auction high of $3,995 for an MS67 Plus RD example, the 1970-90 Lincoln Cent proves that even a 1-cent coin can become a fascinating and valuable collectible when rarity and exceptional preservation come together. Thanks for watching.